What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference Best.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me, as always, it's AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. We had a great couple of guests the last couple of weeks. A big shout out to John Greco last week. A big shout out to Daniela Tomich the week before. Great guests from two schools 20 miles apart, Toledo and Bowling Green. Now we're back. We are gearing up for week 8 of the college football season. I'm pumped.
Absolutely. We talked about this before we got on air here. Is this our first full week of pure action? No,
I think it's our second. Week 5, I think, was pure action.
Okay. Yeah, either way, there's no non-conference games this week, which is fantastic. We have this week, next week, and then we get into the weekday games. I believe that is, was that week 8, week 9, wherever that
week 10 is the first full week of weekday.
So we are coming up on a week 10 already, blowing through the season already.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going by so fast, and here we are just getting the meat of things. And as if anything showed us this past week in action, anything's up for grabs right now. I think the conference is up for grabs. There's a lot of surprise performances and dominating performances, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody who looks at the MAC, you already know what you're getting when you watch the Mid-American Conference. You know that anybody who's the favorite, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard. You hope something sticks and you hope to be right. And we're seeing that pretty early on here. I retweeted our graphic from our preseason picks, and we're getting a little bit roasted. I think, AJ, there was some calls for you to post an apology with a horns up symbol.
Saw that, yeah. I mean, at the beginning of the year, nobody would have known Rocky Lombardi would have gone down the way he did. He was out 3-4 games. He came back and played this past weekend. He played majority of the snaps too.
Yeah, he played a majority of the snaps. Didn't look great, which expected for his first game back. He only had about 120 yards passing, but he still added an extra level of playmaker ability to that offense. And that was a big one. So we can just start with that game this week, do the recap on Northern Illinois, Eastern Michigan.
Yeah, let's start with that one because the beginning of that game, nobody knew if Rocky was going to play or not. He was warming up, so I kind of figured, okay, it'd be a practice thing, just kind of keep him loose and whatnot. But he ended up playing playing most of the game. I mean, it was really interesting too because they obviously won 39-10, which I think was a kind of surprise over Eastern Michigan, who's been playing really good football here lately. Yeah, Rocky Lombardi was 11-15 for 115 yards. No touchdowns, no interceptions. He averaged 7.7 yards a pass. I mean, they won that game clearly on the ground. Harrison Whaley on the day, 16 carries, 158 yards. And right behind him was Antrell Brown, 17 carries, 86 yards with 3 rushing touchdowns. So I mean, that was really where Northern Illinois won that game. It was kind of surprising too how good NIU's front has been. We saw them live a few weeks ago against Buffalo. Played a great game there, and they've been playing pretty solid. We've talked about Jose Ramirez and that defensive line, and giving up 287 yards on the ground. It's kind of uncharacteristic for an Eastern Michigan team.
Yeah, so for me, that's the takeaway, right? Is they gave up almost 300 yards on the ground. Northern Illinois had 5 ball carriers, 49 rush attempts, and 3 rushing touchdowns. That was huge. You talked about Harrison Whaley. He had a long touchdown run of 76 yards. Obviously that's about a third of the yardage that they picked up on the ground, but that's still 76 yards on one run, right? Yeah. So you look at what Northern Illinois' rushing did. Passing wise, again, they only had about 123 total passing yards, which was totally fine. Rocky obviously comes in. He has a decent enough game. Jordan Lynch even had a snap under center where he played,
Not Jordan Lynch.
or Justin Lynch. Sorry, not Jordan Lynch. I'm so used to seeing Jay Lynch and the Northern Illinois logo, and I get flashbacks from when I was a student at Toledo.
Right. Same here. Good Lord.
The little bit of terror strikes the heart when you see that name. But
Oh,
anyway,
we could do a whole episode on him.
oh yeah, I can't wait. That's going to be a whole lot of fun. But Eastern Michigan, yeah, I mean, you look at what they did defensively. They had 73 tackles.
Yeah.
You know, they still went after things. They still had 2 sacks. You know, the biggest thing of the day, they only had 1 QB hurry, so they were not in the backfield that often. They only had 6 tackles for losses. I was not impressed. I mean, 2 of those tackles for losses were on Rocky Lombardi for, his rushing stats were 2 carries for negative 13 yards. So 2 of those were on him. Whereas conversely, Northern Illinois, they had just 45 tackles. They did have 5 sacks though on Taylor Powell, which was huge. 2 QB hurries and then 8 tackles for losses. But I think for me, the big takeaway on this Northern Illinois defense forced turnovers, and that was something that Eastern Michigan couldn't do. James Esther, who we've mentioned before on this program, he had a pick and he looked good doing it. I think it was a pick 6, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
To pretty much start the game. That kind of set, and I think that was kind of what set the tone for Northern Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. You look at it too. I mean, on the other side of the ball for Eastern, this is Powell. We didn't see him play when we went to Eastern.
No,
Against Buffalo, and nobody really knew as to why he wasn't. There has been some injury thing that nobody really knew about, but nevertheless, just this ball game here, he was 11 of 23 for only 197 yards with 1 touchdown, 1 interception. On the ground, he had negative 49 yards on the ground, and which brought down the rushing stats for Eastern to only 29 yards on 27 attempts.
and that's a stat I wanted to highlight. When you're averaging just over a yard a carry, you're not going to win many football games, and that was the tale of the day. Everybody talks about the rushing game for Northern Illinois. Got to really look at the other side of the ball, the rushing game for Eastern Michigan. Now, I don't want to belabor Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois too long. We got a bunch of other games to get through, but I think it's really important to focus in on the fact that Eastern Michigan's been blown out twice in conference play. A team who went out west, upset a Pac-12 team, a team who looked pretty good. I think they went 3-1 in non-conference play. They're now only 4-3. Maybe there needs to be some adjustment. Obviously, Taylor Powell, not the best day out, but that's 2 blowout losses in conference play, and really 1 more, and I think you're out of the MAC picture.
I think so. Eastern too. And we'll end it here on this. Hassan Badone has been non-existent this year. He only has 19 receptions for 212 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaging 11.2 yards at reception. He's a huge part of that offense. So I'm not really sure as to what's going on, not being able to get him the ball. You kind of look at his splits here. He's not being targeted a whole lot. On this year, he said he has 19 receptions. He has 11 receptions at home and only 9 on the road. He had 12 receptions the entire month of September, 7 the month of October.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to go through the whole breakdown here, but nevertheless, you got to get him the ball. He's a playmaker. And we
got to
talk
get him the ball. Absolutely.
We talk a lot about him at Media Day with Coach Creighton. He's a huge part of that offense. So it's going to be important for somehow, if they want to make us, they play Ball State this week in Muncie for homecoming. So they're gonna make a run. They've got to get him involved in the offense.
They got to take on the Ball State Cardiacs this week, and we'll touch on Ball State here in a moment. But yeah, something's got to be figured out in Ypsilanti. Ideally, they get back on track this week for their sake. Moving down to Kent State Toledo. When I tell you, I was having a mini heart attack when this game first started. Kent State races out to a 21-0 lead in the first 5.5 minutes of this game. I was ready to cash this in and say, all right, Kent State clearly is going to be the team to beat in the Mid-American Conference. Boy, were we wrong. Toledo turns it around, goes on a 52-10 scoring run, shuts Kent State out completely in the second half. And just when you talk about playing come from behind football, this is exactly what you look for in a program who is going to win or compete for a conference championship. Toledo down 21-0 early. A lot of teams give up after the first 6 minutes. I mean, I think we saw that with Northern Illinois, Toledo a week ago, but Toledo battled back. They told their guys on defense, hey, let's stay focused. Let's stay sharp. Toledo went on a 28-10 run to finish out the first half.
Yeah.
To only go into halftime down 3, and then again ripped off 24 more points in the second half, completely shut the Kent State offense down. And this was a game, I got to finish watching this game after Akron Central Michigan, and I was thoroughly impressed by the fight of Toledo. Colin Schlee, of course, he had 13 of 26, 162 yards. He did have an interception. Marquise Cooper, he ran all over the Toledo defense, a rarity against the Toledo defense. 31 carries, 166 yards, 2 scores. Colin Schlee, he had 2 rushing scores. So Dante Cephas, this was the one that kind of jumped out to me. He only had 68 yards on 5 catches. This was not a team who, I think the defense just forgot to show up for the other 3 quarters. Sure. They showed up. They played tough in the first quarter and then completely disappeared for quarters 2, 3, and 4.
Right. Yeah. It was a 21-point win for the Rockets. And you kind of look at the team stats and the breakdowns here. Toledo only outgained Kent State by 97 yards, 490 to 393.
Mm-hmm.
But penalties, that's one thing we talked about on media day, and you asked Coach Kendall about it. Toledo, five penalties for 35 yards. It's getting progressively better every week. And time of possession was a huge one here for this one too. 33 minutes for the Rockets, only 26 for the Golden Flashes. So Toledo did a fantastic job of commanding the ball and not turning it over. There's a 1 interception thrown by Kent State. Outside of that, each team had 1 turnover, a fumble and an interception. But nevertheless, Toledo was able to kind of put things together and move.
Well, and that's the other thing, right, is penalties. And that you mentioned us talking to Coach Kendall about that at Media Day. Toledo has really cut down on their penalties this year, which is a big part of the reason why they're 5-2. A year ago they were 3-3 at this point of the year. Kind of not really looking, 3-3, 3-4 at one point, not really looking to do much. They didn't have the opportunities to win games because they kept committing penalties. A lot of 1-score games that they lost last year. I think Toledo lost 4 games by, 6 points or less. And, we talked about Northern Illinois winning those kind of games, those 1-possession, 1-score games. Toledo was on the other end of that last year. And now we're seeing, thanks to cleaning up the penalties, cleaning up a lot of things, we're seeing Toledo come out and they're averaging a margin of victory by 20 plus points against every MAC opponent they've played this year, which is frankly impressive.
Yeah, you look at the rest of Toledo's schedule here. Tough one this week at Buffalo.
Yep.
Then they go to Ypsilanti, Eastern Michigan. They host Ball State. They host BG. They go to Western. Their next 2 or 3 games are going to be a grind. And if Toledo can get through these next couple of games, there's a good chance you can see them in Detroit in December.
I think if Toledo wins 2 out of their next 3, they've all but guaranteed they're going to Detroit, because at that point you only have one, the next 3 games after Eastern Michigan and Ball State, you only have one more divisional opponent left, and that's Western Michigan to close out the year. I don't want to look over Bowling Green. We can talk about them here in a minute, but Buffalo, I think, is the toughest matchup right now. Eastern Michigan, they're not going to go away. They always play Toledo tough. Ball State always plays Toledo tough, likes to play upset and likes to play spoiler. But if Toledo can win 2 out of the next 3, that puts them at 5-1 in conference play with 2 games to go. I genuinely think that this is an opportunity for Toledo to finally get back to Detroit for the first time since 2017.
Yeah, I mean, it could really come down to that Ball State game. It
Yeah.
could really come down because Ball State's sitting there in second place in the West, and that game could be bigger than what we expect it to be.
Game could be a lot bigger than what we expected to be. I think Toledo's best shot is to continue to say, in Finn we trust. He had 7 total touchdowns this last week, 6 passing touchdowns, which tied a school record. 7 total touchdowns. And he's the 7th quarterback to have 7 total touchdowns on the year in FBS.
Yeah.
Keep the ball in Finn's hand, and Toledo's going to keep averaging 50 points a game.
Sure. In the West, it's Toledo 3-0 in conference, Ball State 2-1. Then NIU, Eastern, Central, and Western are all 1-2. Now you go up to the East, Buffalo's 3-0, OU sitting there 2-1, BG sitting there 2-1, Miami of Ohio and Kent State 1-2, and Akron sitting there at 0-3. And let's talk about Akron next.
So Akron, Central Michigan, when I tell you this was a heartbreaker. I was sitting there in Infocision Stadium at Suma Field. I was sitting there in that press box, and I watched Charles Guthrie break down and just absolutely look at the field in complete disbelief. What had happened was Akron's defense really showed up to play, and we can break this down. When Marion Lukes did an admirable job filling in for Lou Nichols. He had 160 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, looked excellent in this game as the backup filling in for the starter. And to me, this was kind of Marion Luke's coming out party. So big shout out to him. Great afternoon for that young man and contributing to the win. But you look at this game, it was 28-21 Central Michigan. Akron was down 21-7 at one point in the third quarter, and their defense buckled down. Shockey Jaquise Louis had a beautiful touchdown catch late in the third quarter from DJ Irons, who, by the way, had an excellent day himself, 25 of 38, 255, and a touchdown. But then Akron goes into the fourth quarter, ties this thing up on a Clyde Price touchdown run. Akron makes a huge defensive stop to prevent Central Michigan from scoring, gets the ball back, and they are driving down the field. They get to the 37-yard line of Central Michigan. There's a miscommunication on offense. DJ Irons looks like he's handing the ball off to Price. Price, I think, thought DJ was keeping the ball. Neither one of them walks away with the ball. The ball hits the ground, and Thomas Incoom picks it up, races it back in for the Central Michigan score and the go-ahead with 1:50 left in the game. Brutal finish for
it really is. And Akron's sitting there at 1-6 in the year. They are a lot better than what their record shows, I really think. DJ Irons has missed a little time due to some injuries. But you kind of look at their schedule here. Week 1 was a struggle against St. Francis, Pennsylvania. That went to overtime. I think that was kind of a surprise to everybody, but they won that 30-23.
Well, and that one was a surprise solely because I think a lot of people expected them to just dominate that one, and they didn't. But I'm going to lend a little bit of credence to the fact that this is a roster of a lot of transfers. So they're still gelling, still trying to figure each other out. But they got the win, and that was huge to start the season. But Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, the week 2 they went up to Sparty, lost that one 52-0. Went to Tennessee. They had a grind there week 2 and 3. Went to Tennessee and lost that 63-6. Played Liberty tough, lost that one 21-12. They played BG really tough, lost that one 31-28. Lost to OU 55-34, and then lost this past weekend 28-21. So a lot of these games are fairly close. And they have Akron this week, Miami of Ohio the following week, then Eastern, then Buffalo, then Northern Illinois. I see a couple more wins in here, but I think give Coach Moorhead another year to really develop this roster, this program. They're going to be someone to mess with in the next year or two.
Well, and that's what you look at it. take away the fumble, and obviously we can't, right? We can't erase mistakes that cause losses. Take away the fumble, and I think there was a pick at the end of the Bowling Green game, which
Yep.
helped secure it for BG. So
Yep.
take away those two things. Akron's 2-1 in conference play,
Yep.
which is a far cry from what they were a year ago, right? So I think you're right that they are really, really close. They have a lot to look forward to.
Very much.
Obviously, 1-6 is not ideal, but I mean, I'm just looking at some of the stats here. They had 20 first downs. They limited their turnovers. They just had one. They had almost 300 total yards. I mean, they looked pretty good in this game. They went down early, but I'm pretty impressed with what we're seeing out of Akron, who, for all intents and purposes, could be 3-4.
Yeah.
And obviously they're 1-6, but I mean, they very much could be 3-4. Lou Nichols was a healthy scratch. It looked like at the beginning of the game. So a lot of people expected him to come out and kind of run all over Akron. He did not do that. However, that was Marion Lukes who picked up the mantle and said, I got this. But, I think Lou Nichols is back this week. It was a little bit of a shock to see him not playing last week, but again, he'll be back this week, it looks like, and Central's at home, and that's Central, I think, has the opportunity to kind of right their season, right the ship a little bit. They're going to be 2-5, or they are 2-5 after this last week. They're looking at hoping to move to 3-5, but Akron, I don't want to say you write this season off. I think you got to play hard for the rest of the season and hope to grind out a couple more wins. But at 1-6, bowl games probably off the table unless you go on a huge run at the end of the season. But I don't know. I mean, again, Joe Moorhead, I think once he really gets his system in place, they're going to continue to look better and better and better. DJ Irons was fine. Again, 255 yards through the air. This is an Akron team who next year, this season's lost, but next year they're going to cause some issues in conference play.
Yeah, without a doubt. They'll be a fun team to look forward. They'll be a fun team to watch. No doubt about it.
So let's move on to Bowling Green, Miami, Ohio. I know you caught some of this game. You actually live tweeted it for everybody.
Yeah, I did.
Talk to us about what you saw.
This was a really fun one. BG ended up winning it 17-13. This was a game that was back and forth all day long. This was really interesting. There was a lot of, I think it was the same thing for you when you were in Akron, is the wind. BG had wind issues. I live in Colorado now, and we had wind issues on Saturday. My parents in Indiana had wind issues. You had them. BG had them. So they really did a good job. Throwing the ball wasn't the greatest of options, let's just say, on Saturday. You got to look at the team stats here. BG did have 325 yards, only 149 on the ground. Or excuse me, 149 through the air, 176 on the ground. Miami, Ohio at 189, 91 yards passing, 98 yards throwing. But this one, penalties were a big one for both teams here. 6 penalties for 60 yards for Miami of Ohio, 8 for 85 for BG. You look at the time of possession, BG had the ball for almost 5 minutes more, 32 minutes compared to Miami of Ohio's 27 minutes. This was one that was interesting. I believe BG went into half up like 2 or 3. I think they went up at 3. And then they came out and kind of did a good job of being able to shut down Miami of Ohio the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
This was an interesting one. And I think this game was definitely, I tweeted about it also, how BG's defensive front they're getting after the quarterback this year.
Yeah.
They did a great job of getting after Smith in this one. They were able to force him to throw passes he didn't want to throw. They were able to force him out of the pocket, scramble, throw on the run. And we've seen Smith throw against Cincinnati. He's not the biggest of guys. So him sitting in the pocket is not the most convenient. But also when you get a quarterback scrambling outside of the pocket, it's not the most convenient. And BG did a good job of getting him outside and forcing him to throw it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the key, right? BG all offseason, there was a lot of talk about this defense. Everybody talked about the defensive line was going to be problematic for opposing teams. Their secondary was great, and we've seen them get gashed all season long. Early on, one of the worst defenses in the conference. Buffalo absolutely throttled them a week ago, 38-7, and Buffalo actually almost pitched the shutout with that one. This week, I don't know what Scott Loeffler told his guys, but in practice, they really buckled down. They really focused in, and Miami, obviously missing Brett Gabbert, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's hurting them. But all my hat's off and credit to Bowling Green for coming out and playing a great defensive game. This, 17-13, like you said, this was not a game in which a lot of offense was done. Matt McDonald, 149 yards in this game. And he was fine. He wasn't spectacular, but he wasn't bad. He helped his offense do enough to get a win. But my credit is to the Bowling Green defense, who when I look down at the stats, not only did they get to the quarterback early and often, but they really, really pushed Miami, held them to 6 of 15 on first down or on third down, did not let them convert a fourth down. They held them to just over 50% on passing attempts. Rushing, they only picked up 98 yards. Like, penalties, everybody wants to talk about the penalties and get this game. It's actually a fairly evenly called penalized game. Miami had 6 penalties for 60. Bowling Green had 8 for 85 yards. Bowling Green did lose the ball twice, a fumble and an interception, but they overcame that. And I think that's the critical part here. I think we've seen them not overcome those turnovers, especially with Buffalo a week ago. Now they finally overcame those turnovers. They really buckled in. They focused on what they were doing. And I mean, they put up 500 yards of offense.
Yeah, they did. And, I talked about getting after the quarterback and sacks and whatnot. This is one of the things I screenshotted from ESPN. So BG is 5th in the country when it comes to total sacks. USC is 1st at 24. Louisville, 2nd at 23. Liberty sitting there. Liberty and Cincinnati tied at 3rd, 23. BG, Michigan, and Troy sitting there tied for 5th with 22 team sacks. And BG has 13 players with 1 sack. That's the most in FBS.
That's impressive. You talked about that defensive line, right? That's huge. And a lot of teams don't appreciate that as much as I think they should, because if you can get the guys up front to disrupt that offensive line, you're going to win a lot of football games.
Yeah. And they've done a fantastic job, obviously, with the numbers of doing that this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So hats off to Bowling Green, now sitting at 2-1 in the MAC East, sitting in a tie for second place behind Buffalo. So obviously Bowling Green still very much alive in the MAC race. Not saying they're out of it yet, not saying that they're going to win it. They do have the tie-breaking loss to Buffalo, so they need a little bit of chaos from Buffalo. But don't discount Bowling Green just yet. Speaking of Buffalo, let's talk about that Buffalo UMass game. Not much to write home about. Buffalo did exactly what they needed to do. There was a lot of concern about Buffalo at the beginning of the year. They started 0-3 with a loss to an FBS program. They've now won 4 straight and are undefeated in MAC play.
Yeah, I mean, this one was I was able to get bits and pieces of this game. Buffalo put up 480 yards on the total to UMass's 220, and they lost to UMass last year, correct?
I don't know if they lost to UMass last year, but I think it was a pretty close game. Yeah.
Either way, yeah. Buffalo was able to put up 277 yards through the air compared to UMass's 108, and on the ground 203 yards for the Bulls and 112 for UMass. So this was kind of a game that Buffalo obviously went at halftime up. And they looked like they were moving, they were rolling pretty well. And they did a fantastic job closing it out against a Don Brown defense that we've seen kind of deteriorate over the past couple of years ever since he was let go from Michigan.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a big part of it, right? Is when looking at it, Cole Snyder, he's really coming into his own. He looked great, minus the interceptions this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
He had 3 passing touchdowns. Again, it's the UMass defense who, they're now 1-6 on the year. They got blasted by Toledo. They got blasted, or they did not get blasted, but they did lose to Eastern Michigan. So Cole Snyder looked excellent. The stat I really am looking at is Buffalo ran for over 200 yards on these guys. Al-J Henderson had 99 yards. Ron Cook Jr. had 43. Mike Washington had 42. Cole Snyder himself had 28. So this is an offense that they're now really, really cooking. And then you flip to the defensive side of it. They tacked on 4 sacks for the day.
Yeah.
And then 15. This is the stat that blew my mind. 15 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
That you don't do that a lot.
Defenses are getting after it. On the day, James Patterson, who's been at Buffalo for 20 years, it seems like, he had 7 total tackles, 3 solo, and 2 tackles for loss. Outside of that, everybody else either 1.5 or half a tackle for loss. But nevertheless, he's the commander of that defense. He's done a fantastic job in his whole career there. And, we'll be seeing him on Sundays, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely playing that linebacker. So, yeah, this is a great game. I think Buffalo, they're starting to find their stride. They have a real test this week against Toledo, and that'll be a fun one to watch.
So moving on to Ball State UConn. This is the Ball State Cardiacs, as we're seeing all over Twitter, as we're calling them ourselves, who have now won 3 straight come from behind wins.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And you got to put everybody did a fantastic job of this game. I was able to watch the first half of it. But you kind of look at it here. They beat UConn 25-21. UConn came out hot. I think Ball State ended up scoring 17 unanswered points. I believe that ended up being something like that. But nevertheless, UConn came out hot. The Jim Mora defense, they played well. Ball State was struggling that first half. They couldn't get the ball moving on the ground, through the air. They couldn't complete anything. Paddock threw an interception. And on the day, Paddock was 19 of 39 for 147 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. But the Ball State Cardinals had 209 yards on the ground, 179 of them, and 3 touchdowns of them were from Carson Steele. So 21 of the 25 points were from one individual. On 32 carries, 179 yards, 3 touchdowns. His longest was 25 yards. Carson Steele just won this game for the Cardinals. He scored as many points himself as the UConn Huskies did as a team.
Yeah, you look at and we've talked about Carson Steele as a player before, right? This guy is somebody who's going to come out and he's going to fight, and he's going to fight hard to help get his team a victory. And I tell you what, man, I really like this kid. I think that he's a special talent for Ball State. He was only a 2-star coming out of high school.
Yeah, but Center Grove down there in Greenwood, Indiana. Yeah, Center Grove pumps out Division I athletes left and right. They're phenomenal. Won a state championship in his senior year. They were 14-0. Has a pet alligator. Like, the dude's impressive. So
he's impressive, and Ball State was in an 11-point deficit going into halftime, and then just ripped off 15 straight points to secure this win.
Yeah,
hats off to them. Carson Steele, the big playmaker in the second half. Obviously he had 3 touchdowns on the day, and that's the big takeaway for me. It's 3 touchdowns. It got to the point where UConn had an 85% chance of winning this game as late as 9:14 left in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
And then it was all Ball State the rest of the way.
It was.
John Paddock. Well, I was going to talk about John Paddock for a second.
Yeah.
He's struggled a little bit. He 19 of 39, 147 yards, an interception. But when you've got a guy like Carson Steele in your backfield, your passing game doesn't need to be elite. Obviously, they're dealing with the hangover of not having Drew Plitt, right? Paddock, I think, is serviceable, and I think he's doing fine. Ball State's sitting at 3-1 in conference play.
They're sitting pretty, because we talked about that Toledo Ball State game here in 2 weeks. That's going to be huge, and this is exactly why it's going to be huge. If Ball State wants to go deep, and to make it to Detroit, they're going to have to get the ball to Jay-Sean Jackson. He only had 8 receptions for 71 yards. Brady Hunt, tight end, who's a great weapon. He only had 5 receptions of 25 yards. Abdur Rahman, from the transfer from Rutgers, or is he from Rutgers? Yeah, I believe it's from Rutgers, or Vanderbilt, sorry. He had 3 receptions for 24 yards. Presley had 1 for 15. Johannes Tyler, 2 for 12. They're going to be able to get the ball to these receivers. Carson still can't win every single game for you, especially if you're down. But I think he did a great job of wearing down the UConn defense. But that's not going to happen as we get into, the MACtion, the Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because there's going to be a lot of running. And I've been to those games where it's Tuesday night, it's going to be cold, it's going to be raining, it could be snowing. It could be all those things. And you're going to run the ball, but you can't run it 110 times a game. They're going to
No.
have to be able to open up the passing game. And Paddock has had some great highs and some lows this year, but I think once he gets settled in, it's going to take a while. I think once now that we're out of conference play, he's going to be strictly playing MAC schools. This will be huge for him. And Coach New knows that. He's been there. He's done it. I think Paddock will be fine going the rest of the way.
No, I think so. And yeah, it'll be fun to see what happens. Moving on to the last game of week 7, Ohio taking on Western Michigan, a Western Michigan team who has just frankly completely fallen apart this year. Last year, they won 8 games, including the Quick Lane Bowl, which we were there for against Nevada. And they're really, really feeling the loss of Sky Moore and Caleb Elby.
Big time. I saw them week 2 against Ball State. They looked fantastic. Slopeck, at that point, that was only his second start. I talked to Coach Lester about this in the post game. He takes some shots inside the pocket, and then when he was scrambling, he took some shots on the sidelines and whatnot. And he came back tough. He was throwing the ball really well, but there hasn't been a lot of great progression from him since. He was 17 of 31 for 249, 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions.
That's the stat right there. And to tack on to that, the Western Michigan had 6 turnovers altogether. I don't care how many yards you have. Obviously, I think the defense played pretty well. They forced 2 turnovers themselves. They limited Ohio to 383 yards. The offense still picked up 17 first downs. You can't win a football game with 6 turnovers. I don't care how good your offense or your defense are.
Not at all. And they had a hard time too getting Sean Tyler open. He had 19 carries for 84 yards.
Yep.
They only had 84 yards on the ground. Slopeck had negative 22. It kind of brought that back down to 84. But they just had a hard time. Corey Crooms, he had 5 receptions for 87 yards. He's a good receiver. Just a matter of not throwing 5 interceptions. You just can't do that kind of stuff, especially as we get here into full conference play. OU sitting there 4-3, Western Michigan sitting there 2-5. Now, granted, we all knew the questions at quarterback for Western this year. We had talked to Coach at media day about it. He was very confident in his quarterbacks because he had Stone, the kid, that transfer from Alabama, and he has a couple other guys who are capable of playing. It's just a matter of, do you make a switch now or do you ride it out?
And that's the question Coach Lester has to figure out. That's what he's got to look at. And I'm sure he's examining that every single week in practice. It's gonna be a matter of what happens. So I think Western is fine. They still have plenty that they can achieve this season. They can still play spoiler to a couple teams.
Sure.
And they can still make a bowl game. That being said, they've got a long hill ahead of them, and we can kind of look at that with their conference game this coming week. They travel to Oxford, Ohio, and play at Yager Stadium against Miami.
That'll be a tough one.
This is going to be a tough one.
That'll be an interesting one too. I think that's going to be a low-scoring game too.
I think it's going to be low scoring until the 4th quarter. If Western Michigan can limit their turnovers, I think that they have a shot at this one. Miami proved last week against Bowling Green, you have a good defense, Avion Smith struggles.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. Now, there's talk that Brett Gabbert might be back this week. I don't know. So we'll definitely wait and see. But if Brett Gabbert's back, there's that changes things a little bit.
But on the other side of the ball, though, we got to talk about OU. 264 yards through the air. Curtis Rorke, he's a quarterback who in the conference who's been pretty quiet this year. He's just kind of putting up really good numbers, but he's just doing it quietly, not grabbing a lot of attention. It's 22 of 34 for 264, no touchdowns, 1 interception. But on the ground, though, how do you say his name? I'm sorry. Bangura. Bangura.
That sounds right.
He had 25 carries for 77 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns on the ground total. Curtis Rorke had 1 as well. OU just slowly and quietly just beating teams. They're sitting there 4-3, and it's gonna be interesting to see where they're at here when it comes late October and November.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, Curtis Rourke, I really like what he's done for this offense. There's a lot of talk about him last year. He was a fine quarterback last year, but you look at his numbers on the season so far, and he's got 2,200 yards. That's best for eighth in the country.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, this is a kid who can sling the ball, and he's only a junior. I mean, and he's a big quarterback for the Mid-American Conference. He's 6'3", 216, so he's tall. He can get the ball out of his hands. He only has 3 interceptions on the year, which is tied for 30th in the country.
You talk about all those yards, though. 503 of them came in one game against Fordham.
Hey, that doesn't matter. That's still 2,200
which is ridiculous,
yards.
right? They won that 59-52, and Fordham was now 3-1. Like, boy,
that was a crazy game.
That was an experience to watch. That was a fun one.
But yeah, so I mean, you just look at everything that he's done and what he continues to do, and I'm not upset with it, because literally you talk about him throwing that many yards against Fordham, but then the week after he throws 322 against Kent State in a loss, throws 427 against Akron in a win, and then still throws 264 against Western Michigan this last week. Yeah. He still almost had 200 against Iowa State. So it's not a matter of the opponent, because he's still gonna sling it, and he's gonna sling it well against you.
Yeah. And they host NIU this week. The week after that, to start off action, they host Buffalo. That's going to be a fun one to watch. He and Cole Snyder are going to be slinging the rock.
So let's move into that week 8 slate here real quick before we get to the week 9 slate. Akron at Kent State, the battle for the wagon wheel. Our first trip to Kent State got a little surprise for you guys. Just stay tuned to our Twitter. We're not going to reveal it just yet. Stay tuned to our Twitter, our Instagram. Got a couple cool things in the work for this weekend as we prepare to see Akron versus Kent State. Kent State on a 3-game winning streak in this rivalry, dating back to 2019.
You went last year when it was in Akron, right?
Went last year when it was in Akron. Akron lost that game 38-0. Yep. And Kent State had over 400 rushing yards in that game. I think it's going to be more of the same. I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive. Mm-hmm. That being said, I do think it's going to be Kent State extends that streak, but Dick Stadium, it's gonna depend on the weather. It's looking to be kind of cool, mid upper 40s this weekend. It's a good one. This is one of the better rivalry games in the Mid-American Conference. And I know that you weren't there last year, but it's literally a full-size wagon wheel that they play for, and they hang it from what I understand, they hang it in their practice facility, and it just hangs there by the door. Mm-hmm. And they see it every single day. And I'm like, that's just, Toledo plays for this, a highway sign, a Battle I-75. Ball State plays for the Bronze Stalk, and then Ohio and Miami.
Which they won that this year too. So that was great to have back. Because last year NIU won that on a last-second field goal.
Yep. John Richardson hit the last-second field goal. And that viral video of him celebrating, dancing on the Ball State sideline, doing the ice in the veins, and but then Miami and Ohio, they play for I think it's just bricks. Yeah. I think it's just a thing of bricks. It's called the Battle of the Bricks. But anyway, Akron Kent State. This one kicks off at noon on ESPN Plus. Looks like it's going to be a great day for football for that one.
Absolutely, we got a lot of great games on the slate this week. You'll be going to these. I'll be live tweeting them from my couch. I'm on Mountain Time now, so it's gonna be nice and early. It's 11 o'clock. Well, no, be 10 o'clock kickoffs.
That's a 10 o'clock kickoff.
Yeah. So look at me. It's gonna be exciting. But yeah, we'll be live tweeting them and things like that. We've got a couple cool things in the works. We've got a video coming. We're doing our first video, if you will. That'll be coming out tomorrow.
Well, by the time this episode releases, it'll be out already. So. But yeah, every Thursday, that's going to be the goal, is to have a quick player breakdown. And you guys listening today, on Friday, you'll be able to see that. You can go check out our YouTube channel, and check that video out. But yeah, so our video breakdown will be out, and that'll be fun. But moving into the second game of the weekend, the 1 o'clock kickoff, Toledo Buffalo. This is the game I think a lot of people have circled on their calendar. This is the pivotal one in the MAC race.
It really is, dude. This one can make or break Toledo's. This game can make or break both Buffalo and Toledo this year.
I think so. I think, it's going to come down to which offense is playing better, but I also think it's going to come down to which defense can make the stop when they need to.
Yep.
The over under on this one is, let's pull it up really quick. The over under on this one is 57 points. Hammer that over.
Yeah, I think so.
Toledo's putting in conference play, Toledo's averaging like 46 points a game themselves. Yeah. Hammer the over on this one. If you're out there betting, the line is Toledo neg 7.5. I think that this is going to be a good one. I don't want to give my prediction too much on this one yet, but Toledo's averaging on the season 38.4 points a game, only allowing 26.3. Buffalo averaging 30.4, allowing 24.4. This is going to be a high scoring affair. This one will be, I honestly think it'll be a 43-40 kind of game.
It has all the makings to be that, without a doubt.
Moving on to Bowling Green, Central Michigan, 1:00 on ESPN3. The only one the only one of two that are not on ESPN Plus. This is a critical game for Bowling Green. This is also a critical game for Central Michigan. I think this is circled on a lot of people's calendars for a different reason. Buffalo, Toledo, to take complete control of the MAC. This one is to avoid being a cellar dweller in the MAC.
Yep.
Bowling Green came out and they played sharp this past weekend against Miami. Now they travel up to Kelly Shorts at Mount Pleasant. Central Michigan, I think they're hoping they have Lou Nichols back. Daniel Richardson is looking fine, but they're going to need a little bit more from everybody to get this win. They got that scare against Akron and, frankly, a defensive stop to beat Akron. But Bowling Green's riding a little bit high after their win from Miami. Central Michigan, they're buckling down in practice. If we know Coach McElwain the way I think we do, he is getting those guys prepped. He's getting them refocused. Like, hey, we got lucky to get that, and he's let them understand that it's not he's not letting them just oh, we got the win, good for us. No, he's reminding them, you guys got lucky to get that win. Let's go earn this next one.
Yeah, without a doubt. This has been an interesting year too. We were very high on Central Michigan going into the year. Yep. I had Richardson as one of my higher quarterbacks, and he's performed well. We saw him against Toledo there at homecoming, and Lou Nichols, he's just been he's been hurt a little bit, but he's just kind of been non-existent. Last year he led the country in rushing, and now you're not really hearing his name.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's completely disappeared, and I think that's what's kind of crazy to me is he in the two conference games he's played in, he's got less than 150 combined rushing yards. That's insane after what he did, all last year, where, like you said, he was the nation's leading rusher. So this will be a big one for Central Michigan and Bowling Green both. I think I like Central Michigan a little bit more than I like Bowling Green in this one. Bowling Green, when they played Marshall, they had a little bit of that hangover after that Marshall victory. Central Michigan, I think they're going to be a little bit more focused after some sloppy defensive play late against Akron. This one's going to come down to, I think, whichever has the better defense.
Without a doubt. And this is a game that I could see being low scoring as well. I don't know what the weather conditions are going to be like this weekend on the East Coast, because like I said, it was windy last week, and chances are it was snowing in Indiana and Ohio this weekend. So
looks like 53 and might be raining. So it's going to come down to a ground game and a little bit of a defensive focus.
Yeah. And that's going to be a really fun one to watch. I think Central, they're at the point now where it is do or die. And this is a good opportunity for them to kind of start that do, if you will.
Yep, absolutely. Eastern Michigan, Ball State, next one up on the conference. They are both 4-3 on the season. Eastern Michigan needs a little bit of help right now. They're 1-2 in conference play. Ball State 2-1. So right now, Ball State's really hoping they don't lose this one. Or Ball State's 3-1 in conference play. Forgive me. Ball State's really hoping they don't lose this one. Eastern Michigan is praying that they win this one. 61 degrees in Muncie this weekend. 61, partially cloudy.
It's
That's going to
homecoming.
be good weather. Homecoming, over under 59.5. I I think I'm liking Ball State in this one because Eastern is doing nothing but backsliding from what we've seen. Obviously, we got to see them um, a couple weeks ago at their game against Buffalo, and they offensively they're fine. Defensively they look terrible.
They did, yeah. And Ball State's a team that's starting to thrive on offense especially.
Yes.
We've bragged on Carson Steele, rightfully so. This is a game that, it's going to be homecoming in Muncie is always a good time. It brings out everybody, and so it's going to be a good crowd. It's going to be a lot of fun. All the festivities started last night or tonight. I forget, like the bed races and whatnot that they do. It's going to be a good time, and it's a great opportunity for Coach New, who was kind of looking a little rough there for a minute early on in the year, especially that loss to Western. But he's really turned things around here this season. They've done a fantastic job, and Coach Stockton is really starting to turn that defense around. And Coach Lynch on the offensive side of the ball is really starting to open up the playbook and move the ball down the field and come from behind, because you can't count Ball State out until the clock strikes zero. They could be down 25 in the fourth quarter and somehow rattle off 26 points.
Well, and I was going to say, you can't count Ball State out. Their largest deficit that they've come back from this year is 17 in the second half. I think that if right now they have to, I think that they can't keep relying on playing comeback football. That at some point they have to be ahead.
Yep.
Because they're going to lose one of these games, and it's going to be because they fell behind,
Yeah.
So I think that this one is a critical game for both Ball State and Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan is looking to stay alive in the MAC race. Ball State is hoping to kind of separate themselves from the rest of the pack, aside from Toledo.
Yeah.
And so this one's a good one. 2:00 on ESPN Plus. That should be a good battle down there in Muncie.
Yep.
Northern Illinois, Ohio, 2:00 on ESPN Plus.
And the way OU's playing right now, I don't see how they don't. They walk away with the win here.
I see, and I think that's the case, but I think you can't count out Northern Illinois either. Now that Rocky's back, that adds an extra level to the offense that gives them an opportunity to be successful. James Esther looks great on the defensive side of the ball for Northern Illinois. Ohio is playing fast tempo ball. They can sling it. We just talked about Curtis Rourke and his 2,200 yards on the year. This is a kid who can sling it. They can come out. They can play. Northern Illinois has a lot of weapons, and I think that sitting at 2-5, it doesn't bode well for them. Ohio, I mean, they look sharp. They're 4-3, 2-1 in conference play. Northern Illinois loses this one. They're out of the MAC West race to get back to Detroit. Frankly, I think they're out of the MAC West race solely because they now have tie-breaking losses to Ball State and Toledo. Yep. Even if Northern Illinois were to win out, they would need Ball State and Toledo to have 3 conference losses. Yeah. That's tough. I just don't see that. I mean, maybe Ball State picks up 2 conference losses. The Toledo game will be big, obviously, but I don't see Toledo losing 3 conference games between now and week 13 with 5 games to go. That's, they would go 2-3 the rest of the way. I just don't see that happening. So, but I mean, yeah, Ohio, I mean, they look sharp. I think that you're probably right. Ohio is going to lock this one up, but this one could be a high scoring affair. This one could come down to no defense. And as we've seen with Ohio, they don't really have much of a defense, save last week against Western Michigan.
Not at all.
And then our last game of the day, Western Michigan at Miami, 3:30 on the CBS Sports Network. I'm just going to say it. Western Michigan's probably going back to Western with an L, back to Kalamazoo, taking home that loss. Miami is just they're I'll just say it, they're pissed after the Bowling Green game. Sure. Western Michigan, Jack Solopek needs to get it figured out, and I have trust in Coach Lester to get his quarterback right. Yeah. That being said, Avion Smith looks good. Miami's defense. I mean, Bowling Green didn't beat them with an offense; they beat them with defense. Western Michigan doesn't really seem to have a defense, so I think Miami has an opportunity to win this one and dominate at home pretty thoroughly. I don't think it'll be a massive blowout, but I think it'll be a multi-score win.
I think so too. Yeah, this is a game where Western needs it desperately. They really do. But are they going to get it? I don't think so. We saw Avion Smith live against Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
He looked okay. That was his first game. So that was his first game as a starter, but he's gotten progressively better.
Yep.
Playing BGU as a top 5 sack defense, 13 guys with at least 1 sack who lead the nation. That's a tough defense to go against. But I think Miami, Ohio, and you've seen them this year too against Kentucky, and Coach Martin, he has things. They'll be okay in Miami. They'll be okay in Oxford, but I think the Red Hawks come away with the win at this one.
I think so, and I mean it'll be a fun game. Probably if you're a Red Hawk fan, a little bit more fun for you than if you're a Bronco fan.
Sure.
But it's going to be a good game down there in Oxford at Yager Stadium, and that wraps up our 6-game slate this week.
Yep.
A full slate of action. Get you guys out by 7:00 on a Saturday, and let you have your Saturday night. And that's kind of what I love about how the MAC plays their games. They're all between noon and 3:30.
7, I'll be 5:00.
Yeah, you'll be ready to go drinking somewhere. 5:00 somewhere, right?
I still do my evening nap in.
There you go. Perfect. So cool. No, that's gonna about do it for us this week. AJ, do you have anything else you wanted to tack on?
That's it. We're getting deep into action here as we're done with non-conference play, and we're excited about it. We're week 8 now, right? Is that where we're
week
at?
8. Yep. Week 8.
Yeah. So week 8, week 9, and then week 10 we start weekday action. So we're excited about that. We got a lot of cool things coming up in the works. So it'll be a lot of fun. Pay attention to our social media. We're going to be doing a lot more cool things there. Keep interacting with us as well. We had a lot of fun interactions this past weekend. A lot of fun interactions.
A lot of them.
You were at a game live tweeting, and I was live tweeting from my couch. That was a lot of fun. So we'll keep it up. I'll be doing the Ball State game this weekend for sure, and whatever other game I get on TV out here, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, man. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Like AJ said, follow us along on Twitter at College Sport Pod. We are real close to 1,400 followers. You guys help us push us over that threshold. We'd greatly appreciate it. You can follow us on Instagram at the CSC Podcast. Trying to keep you guys updated there. Obviously, Facebook, the College Sports Connection Podcast. Wherever you can find us, we're probably there. So thanks for tuning in, subscribing, listening, everything else. And we will see you next week.
See you.